At 5:30 p.m. on Friday the 17th of May 1974, 3 car bombs exploded in Dublin City. The first bomb was detonated on Parnell Street, followed by Talbot Street and then South Leinster Street. The 3 bombs resulted in 26 civilian deaths. At 7 p.m, 85 miles away, a 4th bomb was detonated outside Greason's pub in Monaghan town, resulting in 7 civilian deaths. Between the Dublin and Monaghan bombings, a total of 33 civilians were killed and almost 300 people were injured. The Dublin and Monaghan bombings on the 17th of May 1974 resulted in the most people killed in any one day of the conflict. 19 years later, on the 15th of July 1993, the Ulster Volunteer Force claimed sole responsibility for carrying out the bombings that day.
The Talbot Street explosion was caused by a 100-pound bomb planted in a blue escort car which was stolen in the docks area of Belfast yesterday morning. It killed 7 people instantly, including a man selling newspapers at the Gardiner Street corner. Several others died when blown through the windows of Guinea's store. In terms of life lost, people injured and property damage, the Talbot Street explosion was the most devastating of the 3 in Dublin. The clean-up began early this morning along almost the whole length of the street from Amiens Street to O'Connell Street. The car bomb in Parnell Street killed 5 people instantly. The bomb here was planted in a green Hillman Avenger stolen yesterday at Turin Street in Belfast. It went off outside a building next to the Welcome Inn, 150 yards from the Parnell Monument. Again, the damage to property was extensive. The bomb in South Leinster Street was planted in a green Austin 1800 which was hijacked in Belfast about the same time as the others. 3 people died when it exploded. Gardaí say it was parked for less than 10 minutes when it went off. Every window was broken in the Phoenix Assurance building, which is just across the road from the blast point. Considering the number of people who were in South Leinster Street at the time, the death toll there could have been much higher.
With us here in the studio, a number of people who actually were on the scene of the various car bombs. And first of all, Sean Flood, I'd like to ask you what you saw, what happened.
Yes, I was just about to leave my office at 5:30. Decided, for some unusual reason, to call into a colleague next door in another office to discuss a particular project. I was there for, I suppose, 5 or 6 minutes, and the next minute, out of the corner of my eye, I saw this massive flash. And I said, my gosh, a bomb, dive. But my colleague, unfortunately, didn't dive. He decided to look out the window and suffered facial injuries from flying glass. We then heard a lot of screaming and so on, rushed down the stairs into our showroom, so a lot of our staff gathered there. A lot of them had suffered again from glass injuries. A number of people were carried in from the street with badly injured. My first thought was to look after the injured, which I did by calling on their first aid equipment. My second thought was to call through to our communications centre and ask for an ambulance, because we have direct link communications with the fire authorities, and also call the police. I then decided, well, what best else I could do, and I decided really to look after the injured from there on.
What was the scene like outside?
Dreadful. I've never experienced anything like it, and for one who has travelled extensively to Northern Ireland, I must say that it was something of a shock to me to see this sort of thing happening in Dublin.
Mutilation?
Mutilation. Nothing like it. I've never seen anything like it in my life.
Maurice Kahn, now you were also in this same particular area, I think.
That's correct, Mr. Nealon. I arrived at the scene of the explosion about a minute after it occurred. There was an elderly man lying badly injured at the lane, the entrance to South Leinster Lane. His foot was badly mutilated and he had other severe injuries. Medical people arrived from the dental hospital in Lincoln Place, and with the assistance of other people in the immediate vicinity, he was moved to Leinster Lane to await the arrival of an ambulance. There was also the body of a young girl at the entrance to Leinster Lane, and I understand that the car bomb also fatally injured an elderly woman on the opposite side. That is the side of Trinity College of South Leinster Street.
Well, I know that you have been in Belfast working there during many of the explosions. How did the people react here?
Shock and utter confusion in my estimation. They are not used to this sort of thing happening in the Republic. The last occasion was about 18 months, 2 years ago. I would like now to appeal to the public that if such an occurrence were to take place again in the city, that they would please obey the instructions of the Garda authorities to move away from the area, not to stand under buildings where glass may be hanging dangerously, a chunk of glass, a plate glass window or whatever, falling in the street.
This did happen this evening?
Well, you know, this is a typical example of the sort of injuries that can happen and add to the pressure put on the hospitals trying to look after the more severely injured.
Fine. Well, Noel Breen and your friend Kieran Connell, you were both in the area of one of the bombs.
Yeah, we just happened to be passing the Bernie Inn when we heard the explosion. And, well, we sort of stood in the spot because, being from the north, we decided that it would be better to stay there rather than because we thought that, well, maybe there's a few more explosions on the way, you know, because you can never be sure about things like this. So we stood there. So eventually when we did decide to go up to see what was going on, the place was in utter confusion. I never saw nothing like it. You know, being from the north, I still never saw anything like that. We went to the Trinity College side of Nassau Street, I thought it was, but we went to the Trinity College side of it. And it was just this thing lying on the footpath, and like that completely turned us off, like, you know, it sickened us. And well, I never saw so much confusion in my whole life. It was the same with Kieran. We were heading back then. Whenever we did decide to go back, then it seemed like there was a bomb scare. And well, the guards, they did a great job, but maybe it's because they're so unused to the thing that they just didn't know how to tackle it. There was, what we saw was one guard between the junction there of Dawson Street and Nassau Street, and he just, well, it was one guard on his own. You know, he just didn't know what to do. And it seemed that we were there, well, it seemed a lifetime to us, but we were there before, ages before an ambulance appeared, you know. Maybe it was just because they were so unused to it.
Kieran?
Yeah, well, much the same story. Came up on the scene, as Noel says, after a couple of minutes of hesitation. And, well, the first thing I noticed, of course, was the confusion among all the people. I mean, people were screaming, their faces very obviously very white. And
and the blood that really got
yeah,
us.
I saw the blood, you know, the blood on the street beside a certain person, which, well, recognisable only because of the shoe, apparently a man's shoe. That's the only thing you could recognise, you know, to distinguish the sex. It was a bit much for us, you know. We didn't decide to wait about very long. We decided that...
especially with the bomb scare.
Yeah, we heard the rumours of another bomb scare, so we didn't want to wait about, obviously, because of the confusion. I mean, it really does put fear into you. I mean, we have experienced, not as bad, but such things, and, you know, this is really worse than anything I've ever felt.
After the news broke of this evening's explosions in both Dublin and Monaghan, the Taoiseach remained in his office, keeping in touch with the situation. He had consultations with his Minister for Justice and the Minister for Defence, and there was a full government meeting. Afterwards, Mr Cosgrave recorded this statement.
The Government and I wish to express our profound sympathy to the relatives of the victims of today's outrages and to those who have been injured and maimed. To the evil men who have perpetrated these deeds, we express the revulsion and condemnation which every decent person in this island feels at their unforgivable acts. The Government are as yet unaware of the identity of those responsible for these crimes. But everyone who has practiced violence, or preached violence, or condoned violence must bear a share of responsibility for today's outrages. It is in moments of great tragedy like today's that we see and appreciate the dedicated and unselfish service of members of the Garda, Army, ambulance and fire services, doctors, nurses and others engaged in rescue and humanitarian work. To all who have given, and as I am speaking are still giving, of their services, including hundreds of ordinary men and women who responded so readily and magnificently to donate their blood, I, on behalf of the whole community, convey our sincerest thanks. While our society is menaced by men who perpetrate cowardly acts of violence, the Gardaí and the Army will give the citizens all the protection they can. Their ability to protect you will, however, depend to a large extent upon your vigilance and cooperation. I would therefore request you to report immediately to the Gardaí any suspicious or unusual movements, object or motor vehicle. Occupants of buildings should take care to search and keep a watch upon their premises. What has happened today will help to underline the criminal folly and utter futility of violent action as a means for furthering political aims. It also helps to bring home to us here in this part of our island what the people in Northern Ireland have been suffering for 5 long years. Today's evil deeds will only serve to strengthen the resolve of those north and south who have been working for peace.
50 years on from the greatest loss of life during the Troubles, wreaths were laid today for the victims of the Dublin Monaghan bombings. President Michael D. Higgins said the families deserve the truth, no more, no less.
It is yourselves and your families who have had to bear the grief of those tragic events, and added to it, have had to bear the long wait for information on those tragic events that was and is your right. I know that the resulting pain and suffering remains with you to this day, as do the unanswered questions.
Memories are still vivid for many. Aidan Shields' mother went to collect his father from work that evening.
But he didn't know that his wife was outside to collect him. He wouldn't have recognised her when he walked out either, because later that night, much later that night, I was in City Morgue and I had to identify her, and that was an experience nobody should have to live through.
Talbot Street today, a world away from the chaos of 50 years ago, when one of 3 no-warning car bombs exploded during rush hour. An hour and a half later, a 4th bomb blast outside Grecian's pub caused devastation in Monaghan. While the loyalist paramilitary group the UVF claimed responsibility, allegations of collusion with British intelligence and security figures persist. No one has ever been brought to justice, and families believe there's still time for truth if all the information is there.
There is always hope, and I believe that one day the truth has to be told, so why not produce those documents now?
Today the President said those affected should not be asked to forget about the past, something the people in Dublin and Monaghan have never done.
Since Almighty God has called this family from this life to himself, We commit their body to the earth from which it was made. Christ was the first to rise from the dead, and we know that he will raise up our mortal bodies to be like his in glory. We commend this family to the Lord. May the Lord receive them into his peace and raise them up on the last day.